Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Berger, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are going to do a comprehensive introduction into the Nexus family standards and just kind of give you a good, thorough overview of what this feature does within the CTC Nexus Suite. Before we get into any of that though, I do want to encourage all of you to ask questions throughout the presentation. I will be using the questions panel. I will be monitoring those as we go, and we'll answer those in line when it makes sense. If it doesn't, I'll take time at the end to answer anything that I either missed or that wasn't appropriate to answer at that time. If you are watching the recorded version on our YouTube channel, ask in the comments section. We monitor those as well, and we'll make sure that any question that is asked in that location will be answered. All right, let's go after it now. So, if you've been in the, working with Revit for quite some time, and even if you're new to the game, having a good quality library of Revit families is important, and it's critical to the success of a Revit project. Now, there are a bunch of things that can go wrong if your content is not in a good place, right? Schedules aren't going to work properly. Parameters and making adjustments to dimensional properties isn't necessarily going to work all the time, and you end up with constraints issues or things shifting when they shouldn't be shifting or not shifting when they should be. Or maybe you're doing a lot of manual data entry because they're all just kind of project parameters, and they're not intuitive in extracting the data live from the family itself based on its use within the project. And depending on where you get your content from, it could bloat the file size, and you could now run into additional performance issues. So there's a whole slew of reasons why having good Revit content in your projects is important. Today's webinar with family standards in the Nexus Suite is going to show you a way to check your content to make sure that it's up to a certain level of par that is definable by your team and your organization, so that you can start to make sure that the content in your projects meets a certain level that is definable by you. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to show you where family standards is and how to get access to it. We're going to show you how to set up the rules and what they mean and how to change them, and then show you how to scan content with it. We'll review the reports, show you how to get access to those reports, and then that should be everything. And I don't do PowerPoint, I do live demo. So let's go. Now, when you're working in a Revit project, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, so don't worry about it. But when you're working in Revit, so there's some obvious indicators as to where things might be going wrong. It could be the file size. It could be for performance when opening or syncing to central. If you go to purge and you've got 5,000 items to purge out, that's obvious. Or maybe you've got a 500 meg file. You've got a couple of levels. It's not that big a footprint. And for whatever reason, you don't have any content to purge out. Right, you've already done that, and you still have this overloaded, bloated file. Or maybe you hit up a door schedule, let's say, for example, and you've got empty data when you shouldn't have empty data. Right now, we know I've got doors potentially using the wrong parameters or the wrong parameters in use within my projects, right? And those came in from a family typically at some point, right? So we've got some inconsistencies built in here. So there's ways to go back and try to figure this out. The Nexus Suite has other features baked into it to help you with that in the project activity logger, as far as determining where some file bloat is, or where you may be running into some performance degradations and content counts and things of that nature. So there's other webinars for the Nexus PAL or Nexus Project Activity Logger. I recommend you take a look at that as well. But no more Revit. We're just going to jump right into the portal if I can find it. And there it is. I left too many tabs open. That's my fault. So family standards is part of the CTC Nexus Suite. All of the family standards, rules, and configuration and setup is managed in the portal. So when you get a trial of the CTC Nexus Suite, or you've already purchased it, because of the content management system or Ally, or because you had Hive, which is what it used to be, you still have this. And you find it on the Standards tab. The Standards tab is where you set all of the rules up. Now, down here, so we have project-based rules, and that's for Ally, which is another feature baked into the CTC Nexus Suite. We're going to talk about the family stuff down here. So 2 different tabs, and technically 3, but really 2 different tabs that we need to focus on for setting this stuff up: the family rule set tab and the common standards tab. Now, if any of you have the CTC BIM Manager Suite, the comparable tool there is called Family Checker. The rules between Family Standards and Family Checker are the same. So if you've seen Family Checker, this will be familiar to you. And what you do is we start defining what's important to you here. So do we use a lot of shared parameters in our content? And recommendation is that you should, because that helps make scheduling easier, tagging easier on multiple projects, and it kind of creates that recipe book for you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single family that you need to make, right? So shared parameter use is important. And again, custom parameters just in general, right? Are we using the out-of-the-box built-in parameters for everything possible, or are we constantly coming up with our new things? So we want to make sure that we're using our stuff, not the built-in stuff, but our stuff. So that's what these first 2 lines mean. And then we have standard naming conventions that we can check against. And, are we grouping our parameters in appropriate ways? And that's just, do we want to include it in the rating at all or not? If it's set like this, then it's still checking, but it's not in your rating. So your average score isn't going to be affected by the use or the lack of use of a shared parameter in this example. I like using shared parameters in just about everything I do, so I'm going to leave mine enabled. The next step here is file size. That's huge when it comes to making sure your content is quote unquote healthy, right? Now, sometimes families just get big, and that's just part of the game, right? But most of your content should not be more than 2 megs at best, in my professional opinion. I try to keep everything under 2 megabytes. Every now and again, you get one, especially if you have a lot of types baked into the family, or a lot of nested components, a couple layers deep. Then the file starts to get a little bit on the larger side of things. I like putting a max in there and then having it affect the scores. My preference. My max might be a little low for some of you, depending on the content that you're building and you're working with, but for me, this is a pretty good number. But then we can work with subcategory standards for, are they used or not used when they should be? Reference plane naming, this is one that I find that a lot of people aren't doing, and it's not critical to the workflow. It's helpful, which is why we have it in there, because it helps kind of describe what's going on in the family environment for those that didn't build it, right? If you built the family, you probably know what's going on. But if you didn't build it and now you have to fix it or make a change to it, named reference planes helps. Let's see here. And then search result use, right? We have the ability to set minimum ratings on the content that is available. So what happens here, and I should have mentioned this at the very top, Family Standards works with the content that you have in your Nexus CMS, in your content management system. So if you're using our CMS and you've got libraries and your organization has uploaded a bunch of content and you are distributing that to your end users at your firm, Family Standards allows you to check the content in your library. If you are not using our CMS, then you've got nothing to check. So you can still use it to even just check your content, right? If you buy the Nexus Suite, you've got access to CMS. So you can still use it in that respect. But so down here, then you have the ability to exclude content that does not meet a certain value. The scores are 1 through 5. We'll review that here in a moment. And if anything's less than a 1 or a 2 or a 3, you can say, you know what? I don't want those made available to my end users in our content libraries, so we can hide them. So if it's a 2 or lower, now those families will no longer be present in our content libraries. 3 is a pretty good number. 3, I'm okay with. So once you've gone through this list and you've configured everything that you need, you click save. It'll lock it all in. So the next run will accommodate those changes. But before I scan anything, I've got one more tab, well, technically 2, but really one more tab to define. And the Common Standards tab is where we set up what the parameter groupings are going to be, what our valid and invalid parameter name parts are to be in a family, and any custom subcategories that need to be used in your content. And the way this works is like this. So for parameter grouping, right? We all know that common parameter types: area, angle, currency, length, material, number, text. They're all super common. They can show up in a bunch of different places. And maybe you're not as worried about these, but the way it works is you grab one or more, let's say area and, well, distance is okay. And then let's do number and length. Maybe all of these need to fall into my calculation rules parameter group as being something that can potentially appear in that group. So with those selected, I can grab a group and hit the green arrow, and now all of those parameters are allowable to be organized in the calculation rules group. And that's really all this is. Are we organizing our families in a way that makes sense and is easy for our users to track things down? That's what the parameter grouping aspect is for. Easy to find. The name rules is another big piece because we don't want special, mathematical, right? Yeah, characters being used in parameter names, for example. If they, or in family names, if they are, we want to flag that, because if it's in a parameter name specifically, that's potentially going to throw off any additional formulas that you try to configure. If you had a plus sign, a minus sign, or the backslashes, or the asterisk, if those are in parameter names, it's going to make creating a formula for that much more difficult. It's doable, but you'd rather not do it if you don't have to. So we make those invalid elements. I personally don't like having some of these brackets used. So I would personally put those under invalid parameter name parts, but you can do it either way you want. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to add one additional one, and to add them, you just start typing, right? Maybe you're getting tired of seeing your corporate name appear in the parameter names. Just add it to the list. Then it'll help you find out where this is a problem. Custom subcategories is a similar deal. We have a whole bunch of, all the Revit categories listed. And if you ever had a very customized way of doing, say, your door families, for example, and you wanted to make sure you had the appropriate categories available or in your mechanical equipment, right? There's a bunch of things that, we're doing things a certain way because that gives us the appropriate graphical fidelity that we need on our projects. At any point, you can click the, first of all, to grab a category, you pick a subcategory that you want, you click the green arrow to get it over there, right? Like this. So now in my casework, I've got countertop. And then to add or manipulate those, you just click the kind of edit button here and start typing in the subcategory that's important. Oops, let's get that out of there. So in my case with doors, I need to have clearance. So I'm going to add that. I already had it under mechanical equipment, but I did not have that in my doors. So it's a simple add, and you can customize this as much as you need to, and then save it. And it's a one-time deal. You only have to set it once. It's not like some of the other apps where you have to do it multiple times or load up another settings file. You save this and it's done. And this will be available to you for any family standards check that you run from here on out. All you got to do is make sure you hit save. At the very top, and I'm coming back to this because there's a second spot you can define this. But at the very top of this list is where you specify the corporate shared parameter file that's going to be used for all of these checks. And you just upload it from your network drive or from wherever you've got yours saved to make it available to your teams. Mine says MEP, but I've actually merged all of ours together into one. So this is kind of my corporate standard here. Hit upload, make sure it's present. Make sure to hit save down there at the bottom, otherwise it won't take. You could also go to the master shared parameters tab and do the same thing. Upload it here, set it current, make sure it's listed, and you're good to go. You also have the ability to make edits here if you need to. So if you discovered that a shared parameter was defined incorrectly, or you needed to add something because the projects are using project parameters, but you keep having to add that. You want to change that workflow and get those project parameters added to your families. Well, then those should be shared parameters. You can do your shared parameter editing here as well. And then turn around and directly apply that to your family standards checks. So if you're familiar with Shared Parameter Manager from the Manager Suite, we've taken a lot of those features and put them here. So you can make changes. You can add group, delete group. You can add parameter. You can edit the parameters, make changes, modifications. Keep in mind the GUIDs do change. So there'll be some extra reworking of stuff to get it to be right. Family Processor and Manager Suite helps with that if you get to that point. I'm not going to make any changes here today. I just want to do a check based off what I've already got. So I've got my parameter file. I've got my 2 tabs of rules set and defined. I go to the CMS tab. This is where all my content libraries are stored. I've built a separate one for strictly checking new content that I'm making available, right? So I've made a brand new library. I uploaded content into that library, and now I'm going to check it. And the reason why I do that is because we've been using it for quite some time. I don't want to recheck the entire library worth of content because I know nothing in my Revit content folder has changed, right? I maybe have 30 families that I want to upload and make available. I don't want to check 3,000. I just want to check the 30. The other 3,000 have been checked previously. So you could check, if this is the first time you're doing it, by all means, check the entire library. Go right ahead. Nothing wrong with that. But if you've been using this for a while and you've done multiple checks, it's smart to build a new library just for doing your family standards checks. Once you're done and you're happy with the results, or not, but you can then move the content from one library to the next so that you don't have to reprocess anything. It's all just a modification within the CMS. All right, so I'm going to check this box, and you click the plus sign, or the green check mark up here that appears is to run a check or run family standards check on this particular library. And if you've been running it, these numbers will appear, right? So it'll tell you when it was last run. So I just did one today, but just to show you guys what everything looks like, I'm going to run it again. You get a message saying, are you sure you want to do this? You hit OK. And then it's going to go, and you're going to start getting emails from the system. Now, I'm going to open up the emails that you're going to get so you see what you're working with here. So the first email you're going to get is this. It's going to say family standards check request. It's going to say you have requested a content check on the following libraries. This library and what's in that library. I've got 40 items found. 40 of them are families in the supported versions. 10 will be skipped because there were no changes since the last time. So I had already done this previously and forgot to move the content from this library to the public libraries or to my primaries. Fine, that's good. It's not doing something that I don't need it to do. In this case, I'm scanning 30 families. Excellent. Now, depending, the process, as mentioned in the previous pop-up window, could take a couple hours. It really just depends on how many families you're scanning. On average, we're talking 5 to 20, 30 seconds a family on average, right? Some are quick, lightning fast, and some take longer just because we have hundreds of parameters and we're doing a lot of flexing checks and various other pieces to make sure it's good. Some could take longer, but generally speaking, it gets done pretty quick. This particular check took about 10 minutes today. So if you're ever interested, because what you should get is an email with results like this one here. And it'll say results. It'll have the standards check job number effectively, what was checked, and really what this number here just means, how far along in the process is it? And if it's done, you'll get an attached Excel file or CSV file. This is your results, okay? You take this file and you open it in Excel. And with it open, you're gonna get this. This is what that exact file is. This is my results. It's gonna list all of the content that we've looked at and every single score that it got across the board. 1 through 5 is how the scoring works. 1 is the worst number, 5 is the best number. If a check didn't happen on a family for whatever reason, it's just going to be left blank, right? We're not going to give it a 0 if it didn't have an MEP connector because it's not an MEP supported family like a door, right? There's no point in docking the scores if that element is not applicable, right? Now, so these are the families that I checked. It tells you the category, when it was checked, and these are all the scores. So we're checking detail level and plan views and 3D views. We got element visibility. We got MEP connectors and descriptions and mapping and directions. I've got content GUIDs, which is just for the database and the API records. So most of that's not going to mean much of anything to you. Certainly doesn't to me. But I got file name, type of family, and we just keep on going down the list. And so we're checking identity data, Omni class, assembly code use, warnings, if any. In this case, this isn't counting how many warnings there are. It's telling you, does it have warnings or not? So a 5 is a good number, is a good thing, right? Best score you can get, which means these families don't have any warnings in them. If they did have warnings, this number would be different. It would either be a 3 or a 1, just straight out. Families aren't supposed to have warnings. So if it were me, I'd set it to a 1 and be done with it if it had a warning. At any rate, additional visibility settings, geometry flexing, type flex versus host flex, and just a whole bunch of stuff going on down the line, right? All, excuse me, subcategories meeting our standards. Are they being used? Do we have approved parameters and naming? All the way through. All right, so in an Excel format, this gets a little difficult to read. So you have some options here. If you're familiar with Power BI, you can build a Power BI file. Like I did in a previous webinar, I took the time to build this out for Family Checker and for Family Standards. And you link up your Excel file from that report. You can even create a quote unquote master Family Checker, Family Standards reporting system where you merge all the CSV files together into one file. And now you've got a historical report of things that happened. You know, the dates they were modified. You can get, you can start to see trends on the content that you're putting together if you go ahead and do it in that fashion. But that's all a manual build out. You got to build a Power BI file for that, link it all up. You know, in my case, I had to learn how to use Power BI because I didn't know how to use it. List all the families that you're checking. It gives, you can get the average rating this way, and do various other things with it. You can also download some stuff to get information. So from our CTC portal, if I go back to the portal again, on the dashboard, there's a downloads button. And in this downloads button, you have 2 different options for getting access to some information. One is through the direct connection to the CTC APIs. The other one is another connection to an API, but it's a little bit more data driven, right? It's through a Postman, and that's to help you set up SQL databases. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but this would be another way to get access to some of the data, and you're actually getting access to everything up here on the portal that you guys use. You do a download, gives you an Excel file and a Power BI template to work with. The only requirement at this point is that you request for an API key. Right here, requires an API key for your organization. So if you want to look into this and you don't already have your API key for the project activity stuff, reach out to us, info@ctcsoftware.com, and we will help you get access to that API key for your company. And then you'll input that into your Excel file that you get, right? Your API key here. You put that in here and tell it what you want to see, what you don't want to see, save it, refresh it. You're going to start getting a bunch of data. For the family standard stuff, we're looking at the content file checks tab specifically. And you can see here are the families that I checked earlier today. Here's all of the other content that we've checked historically, and all the reports and scores as you continue on down the line. With this data, you can open the Power BI file that comes along with it and link that all together and start to get a better set of charts and tables and access to the information. How many families in total have been rated? Got over 280. And here is a couple of charts to see kind of where things fall into place typically. Right? I've got a couple really good ones and a couple of really bad ones. Generally, I'm right about 2.5, 2 3/4. Right? And then you can get a list of everything that's good or bad. So on this tab, I'm getting my worst families right here on this little chart. I can switch over to this one and get a list of everything. And I've got a date slider here, so I can specifically say, show me the last 30 days. And in reality, that's the last 30 families that I checked. So it'll tell you, here's the overall ratings, and what their scores were. And at this point, if you're familiar with Power BI and how this data structures are put together, you can start to edit this stuff. You can start adding additional filters to these fields. You can edit the data being received and turn certain things on, turn certain things off, adjust the overall rating parameters to make it something that's more meaningful to you, and do what you need to do to get the information together that you want. And then distribute this amongst your Power users and your BIM management team accordingly. So that's all of it. So I'm gonna go do a quick summary, just real quick. So family standards is part of the CTC Nexus Suite. The standards specifically scans content from your CMS libraries, right? You can build special libraries to house content for scanning or scan the entire library. Either way is up to you. You'll get emailed report, and you can check request updates during that process as well. You'll get a little link in one of your emails to do that. I think it was the first email I showed you. Gives you the ability to request a report. For whatever reason it's taken longer than you think it should, you can find out what the status is. You'll get an email back on that. Get your Excel file, review it, or come back and get your data downloads and link up with your reporting key and review everything there. The important thing is to set your standards up here on the Family tab, the Family Rule Set and Common Standards. This is where you set everything up and configure it to be unique to your environment and your workflow and strategies. So, all right. That takes care of us for today. I hope you see something here that was intriguing. You need to go check it out. Again, if you have any questions beyond today, you think of it later on down the line, please reach out, info@ctcsoftware.com. Likely that'll come to me, and I will be sure to reach out to you guys directly with your answers. Thank you all for attending. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar.